The Young and the Restless spoilers Wednesday full episodes update August 20th, 2025. Claire Newman was no longer the quiet observer standing in the shadows of the Newman dynasty. Her presence in Genoa City had become a catalyst for old wounds reopening and long-suppressed conflicts exploding into the light. Unlike the generations of women before her, Claire carried not only the blood of the Newmans but also the scars of being denied a true place in the family. When the truth of her parentage came to light, some believed it would end in reconciliation, a healing of the fractured ties between her and Victor. But Claire was not so easily swayed. Where others saw a patriarch deserving of forgiveness, she saw the man who had judged, controlled, and manipulated without ever offering her the unconditional acceptance she deserved. It was Nikki who recognized the parallel first. With every icy glance, every refusal to bend, Claire began to resemble her own mother. Unyielding, unwilling to forgive Victor's sins. Nikki had seen this before, lived through it, even embodied it herself in her younger days. She pulled Claire aside, her voice laced with both warning and tenderness, reminding her that anger against Victor was a fire that could consume everything if left unchecked. "You're becoming more like me than you realize," Nikki confessed, urging her granddaughter to break the cycle, to show mercy where others had not. But Claire bristled at the comparison. She was not Nikki's shadow, nor was she some spoiled princess indulging in rebellion for the sake of drama. She was a woman forged in hardship, sharpened by neglect, and driven by a determination to carve her own path. If she held back forgiveness, it was not out of pride but out of principle. The family expected her to soften. They expected her to fold beneath Victor's influence, to eventually take her place at the table and accept his brand of love. Conditional, domineering, and laced with judgment. But Claire had no intention of giving him that satisfaction. Not yet. Her mind was focused elsewhere, on exposing the rot that threatened to spread through their lives unchecked. That rot wore the name Audra Charles. Claire had observed her carefully, piecing together the manipulations, the deceit, the shameless way she entangled herself with Nate while deflecting blame onto Kyle. Audra's ambition reeked of danger, and Claire, unlike the rest, had no intention of letting her games continue unchallenged. In truth, Nate Hastings was already on the verge of discovery. He had begun to sense cracks in Audra's stories, inconsistencies that gnawed at his instincts. He had seen her explanations shift like sand, her eyes dart when pressed for clarity, her words carefully chosen as though rehearsed. He wanted to believe her, but the part of him trained in medicine, in observation, in reading people, could not ignore the signs. If Claire were to come forward, if she were to shine a light on Audra's deception, the revelation might not only shock him but confirm everything his gut had been whispering. For now, Nate wrestled with his loyalty to the woman he loved and his suspicion that she had woven a web designed to entrap him. But truth always found a way, and Claire was ready to deliver it. Meanwhile, in another corner of the canvas, Kane Ashby's struggles added yet another layer of turbulence. He had gambled everything, wagering not with money or power but with the fragile love of his children. In a desperate bid for reconciliation, Kane pleaded for forgiveness, insisting that his mistakes had been born of flawed choices rather than malice. Yet when confronted by Lily Winters, his words only inflamed her anger. Lily, exhausted by years of betrayal, manipulation, and emotional strain, refused to accept his excuses. She saw his pleas not as genuine repentance but as another form of manipulation, a bid to hold on to what he had already destroyed. Her fury erupted, driving her to storm out and leave Kane with the sting of rejection once again. Left alone, Kane called for his children, his voice breaking with the weight of desperation. He needed them to see him not as the man Lily had painted him to be, but as the father who still loved them, who still longed to be forgiven, who still believed redemption was possible even in the ashes of broken trust. While Kane's pleas echoed in the background, Claire's war with Audra drew closer to detonation. Audra had underestimated her, assuming that Claire's new place in the Newman family would make her cautious, hesitant to step out of line. But Claire was not interested in protecting reputations or preserving illusions. She was prepared to strike, to expose Audra for the manipulative schemer she was, and to ensure that Nate finally saw the truth. Audra, of course, was not about to go down without a fight. She hid behind charm and half-truths, insisting to Nate that Kyle was the one at fault, that her connection to Victor was purely professional, that the whispers of betrayal were nothing more than jealousy and misinterpretation. But her refusal to explain her ties to Victor only deepened the suspicion around her. Nate might have once accepted such evasions, but now he was beginning to wonder if every word she spoke was carefully constructed to keep him blind. Nikki, ever the mediator, tried to steer the family back toward peace. She urged Claire to see reason, to grant Victor the forgiveness that could mend old wounds. She reminded her that life was short, that bitterness would weigh heavier with each passing year, and that no one, not even Victor, was immune to the desire for redemption. But Claire was not ready to relent. Her anger was not a tantrum, not a phase, it was a stance. And though the writers might one day steer her toward reconciliation, she wanted first to ensure that truth triumphed over lies. If forgiveness came, it would come on her terms, not Victor's. Kyle, for his part, found himself once again caught in the middle of chaos he did not create. He wanted nothing more than to focus on his life with Claire, to build something pure and real after years of turbulent relationships. But Victor's interference and Audra's manipulations refused to let him live in peace. He had been accused, misunderstood, dragged into narratives that had nothing to do with him, and all he wanted was for the truth to be set free. If Victor could only see past his suspicion, if Claire could hold her ground without alienating the family, if Nate could open his eyes to Audra's deceit, then perhaps Kyle and Claire could finally have the life they both longed for. The storm clouds gathered, each thread pulling tighter toward a climax that promised fallout on every front. Would Claire's determination to expose Audra succeed in ripping the mask from her face once and for all? Would Nate recognize that the betrayal he felt was not from Kyle but from the woman he trusted most? Would Victor learn to temper his judgment before he lost the very granddaughter he was desperate to claim? And would Kane's desperate gamble to win his children's love finally redeem him, or only push them further away? One thing was certain, Genoa City was on the edge of another reckoning, and when the truth came out, no one, Victor, Nate, Audra, Claire, Kyle, or Kane, would emerge unchanged. Lily Winters had never been one to play small when it came to the people she loved, or the people she wanted to punish. Her relationship with Kane had been forged in a crucible of passion, betrayal, and second chances, but the years of turmoil had left her with a hardened edge. Now, as she found herself once more at the center of Victor Newman's orbit, she seized the opportunity to press her advantage. Victor's word was law in Genoa City, and Lily knew that aligning herself with him would give her leverage in ways Kane could never predict. Yet she went further than mere obedience to Victor's commands. She began to play her own game, whispering words designed to stir his emotions, planting doubts that could be weaponized, manipulating his fierce loyalty to his family so that it aligned with her personal vendettas. She cloaked her motives in righteousness, telling herself she was only protecting the children, only doing what was necessary, but the truth was sharper. She wanted Kane buried either by truth or by perception, and she was willing to drag their children into the fire to make it happen. For Kane Ashby, the threat was suffocating. Lily's ultimatum was clear: confess everything or be destroyed. She wielded their children like a sword, making it clear that if he did not bend, she would poison them against him, severing the fragile bond he still clung to. For once, Kane's survival instinct kicked in, and he recognized that Lily's words were not the gospel of truth but the venom of someone determined to win at any cost. He had been reckless, yes, and guilty of mistakes that had nearly cost him everything, but this was different. This was not love turned bitter, this was calculated manipulation, and Kane saw it for what it was. Refusing to be baited into a confession that could be twisted against him, he instead resolved to move quickly, to reach his children before Lily could turn them into weapons in her war. But Lily, sharp as ever, anticipated his move. When her efforts to break him failed, she pivoted with ruthless speed, racing to the children before Kane could reach them. She poured out her version of the story, her voice tinged with pain, her words dripping with wounded truth, painting Cain as the villain once again. She reminded them of his past betrayals, the scars he had left on her heart, the countless times he had failed her. She presented herself as the shield protecting them from his selfishness, his recklessness, his inability to change. The children, caught in the middle of a battle they never asked for, were left to wrestle with the confusing storm of loyalty and anger. For Cain, losing their trust would be the deepest wound of all, but he clung to the faint hope that truth would eventually rise above Lily's manipulation. The risk was immense, for Lily was not only playing on old wounds but threatening to scorch the earth entirely. She seemed almost eager to burn Cain's reputation to the ground, to brand him as something unforgivable, a betrayer, a fraud, perhaps even a man condemned as though cursed by his own actions. Cain knew that if she succeeded, his fight for redemption would be over before it began, and yet he refused to cower. He would not let her rewrite history without resistance. While Cain and Lily waged their war, another storm gathered across town. Claire Newman had grown into her own force, and her resolve was sharper than ever. Her eyes were set firmly on Audra Charles, and she carried with her a truth that could shatter the fragile illusions holding Nate's relationship together. Audra's manipulations had been bold, her willingness to twist reality shocking even by Genoa City standards, but she had finally gone too far. Claire was determined to expose her, to rip away the carefully woven lies, and to force Nate to see what he had been blind to for far too long. When Claire approached Nate, her words cut like glass. She laid out the truth without hesitation. Audra had plotted with Victor, schemed behind the scenes to manipulate and divide, and in the process had betrayed Nate's trust again and again. Claire revealed what she had seen, including the kiss between Audra and Kyle, a moment Audra had tried desperately to erase or explain away. Claire's voice carried no malice, only conviction, and the weight of her honesty shook Nate to his core. For Nate, the news was a devastating revelation. He had spent weeks wrestling with doubt, listening to Audra's explanations that never seemed to quite fit, clinging to the belief that love could survive suspicion. But Claire's testimony pierced through the fog of his conflicted heart. He replayed every moment in his mind, Audra's excuses, her evasions, her refusal to explain her connection with Victor, and suddenly, it all made sense. The betrayal had been real all along, and the truth was staring him in the face. Audra, of course, was not ready to surrender. When confronted, she tried once more to twist the narrative, her voice trembling with feigned outrage as she insisted that Kyle had been the aggressor, that she had only been caught in moments of weakness, that Claire was exaggerating or misinterpreting what she had seen. But Nate's patience had run out. His voice was firm, his eyes sharp, as he demanded every detail, every truth she had hidden. He pressed her to admit what she had done, to stop dodging and deflecting, to finally come clean without leaving out a single detail. The walls were closing in on Audra, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her as the man she had worked so hard to hold on to demanded honesty she could no longer afford to give. The confrontation left them both teetering on the edge of a full-blown implosion, their voices rising, their emotions boiling over. For Nate, the betrayal was not simply about infidelity. It was about trust shattered, about being made a fool, about the humiliation of being manipulated by someone he had given his heart to. For Audra, the fear was palpable. She had built her identity on her ability to control situations, to twist perceptions, to outmaneuver anyone who stood in her way. But now, with Nate's fury burning and Claire's testimony backing it, her options dwindled. And then there was Holden Novak, circling the edges of this storm. He had once tried to convince himself that Claire was nothing more than a distraction, a fleeting temptation he could push aside. But as Claire's strength grew, as her voice rang out against deception, Holden found it harder to bury the feelings he carried. He struggled in silence, wrestling with his attraction to a woman already entwined in battles far greater than his own. His fight to forget her was a losing one, for Claire's fire burned too brightly to be ignored, even from afar. In Genoa City, every thread was pulled tighter, every secret closer to exposure, every relationship stretched to its breaking point. Lily and Cain stood on the edge of destroying what little remained of their family. Claire prepared to dismantle Audra's lies once and for all. Nate braced himself for the truth he had been too blind to see. And Holden's quiet longing threatened to complicate a war already ready to ignite. In the end, the question was not whether the truth would come out, it was who would survive it when it did.